name's Sean Tucker, and as part of my day job, I shoot products for companies. And there's a lot online that you can find about how to shoot small products on tabletops with a white background and just some speed lights, but there's not a lot to show you how to shoot something large like a sofa or a bed or a dining set. So I want to give you some basic tips and tricks for companies who are confused about how do you get good images of your products so that you can get them loaded onto your website for sale. In part one, I'm going to show you how do you light your product and what kind of camera settings you use. Part two, I'm going to show you how to cut that product out onto a white background. And then part three, I'm going to show you how you can recolor your product. Maybe you're someone who makes sofas and you've got 20, 30 different color options of your fabric. You want to be able to take those shots that you've spent loads of time over shooting that one sofa and recolor it to all your different color options, so you've got uniform shots across your site but in all your different color variations. So these are just some basic tips and tricks on how you can shoot your large products well and load them onto your website. So this is what we're going to be shooting, this little chair. You want to start by situating your product, whatever you're shooting, on a white surface, preferably in front of a white wall as well. The reason for that is not necessarily because you're going to be able to shoot and blow this all to white, because it's quite a technical process. You usually need to throw enough white on the background and have some sort of reflecting flooring to do that. We're going to cut this out anyway to put this on a pure white background. So the reason isn't to have this as the white background, the reason is to kill color bounce, because when light hits a color surface, it's going to pick that color up and it's going to put it on your product. That means if you've got a bright blue wall behind your product or you've got a bright red carpet, it's going to pick some of those colors up and put it on your product. Not to mention that you might have chrome legs or silver feet or something, and that's going to obviously reflect whatever's in the room around you. So you need to create a surface, tape some white paper to your floor, make sure you get that white background, just a white wall, just to protect your product from picking up color off those lights. Okay, so let's look at lighting, and everyone does this differently. This is just the way I choose to do it. I start with a big soft overhead light. And what that does is hopefully it's going to give us a beautiful soft quality on the top here, but it's going to give us a nice roll off of light and a gradient into your deeper shadows here, and that creates nice shape. Sometimes I'm not going to have the luxury, or you might not have the luxury of being able to purchase really nice studio equipment. So some places I go, if I can't fit all my gear in the car, I will take perhaps just a speed light to start with, place it on a stand behind, and if I've got a flat white ceiling overhead, I can just bounce that speed light straight to the ceiling. It's going to soften it up, put it on quite a high power, but when it comes back down, it's going to be diffuse and spread out, and it's going to give that nice soft roll off that I want. Today we're lucky enough to have a nice octa on a boom stand, so we're going to use this, but don't let this be prohibitive. Maybe you can't afford the boom stand, maybe you can't afford this softbox. Bounce that light off the ceiling, just make sure that ceiling is flat and white. So let's start by placing this overhead here. So we want it right in the middle, and that should give us that nice soft roll off that we want. There we go, we'll start with that. Okay, so we've got our product set up there. We've got our big overhead soft lights, but before we take our first shot, let's just talk about gear quickly. I'm shooting on a Canon 5D Mark II, which is like an old digital full frame workhorse. It's a great camera. I use these for my day-to-day job, but you can get away with any of these consumer level DSLRs, the kind of 550Ds, 600, 650, 700s, the Canons, Nikon got the equivalent, or any of these new mirrorless cameras as well. They're really great cameras. The lens that I'm using is a 70 to 200 zoom lens. It's the f4 version without IS, without image stabilization. And a lot of people don't use these because obviously with a longer focal length you should have the image stabilization if you're shooting handheld to keep that shot stable. But because I'm always shooting products on a tripod, I don't really need that, and it's an incredibly sharp lens, and yet it's still one of the cheapest L series lenses you get. So this is my setup. I've got my trigger on top to trigger my lights. My settings in camera are always going to be around the same for product photography. I want to make sure that my ISO is as low as possible to keep as much detail in as I can, so I'm going to start at ISO 100. My f-stop is always going to be f10 or above, and the reason for that is because I don't want shallow depth of field when I'm shooting a product like this that I'm going to cut out onto white. I want everything in the shot in sharp tack focus. So we'll start at f10, we'll see where we go from there. and I'm going to make sure that my shutter speed is 1/125, and it will always stay that. I know that if I go faster than that, I'll start to get flash sync issues and my screen will start to fill up with black, because I know this camera, and that's where its flash sync lies, just over 1/125. So I know if I stay here, I'm in a safe zone. So, and after I've just checked that my white balance is set to flash, I can take the first shot and see where we're sitting. So, okay, so that's what we're getting on the first shot. The overhead of the product is slightly overexposed, which I don't want. I can either go and I can change my flash, or I can change it here in camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dial this up to f13 and see what I get. I'm starting to close that aperture down and cut out some of that light. And I know also that I'm creating more depth of field, and I'm in a very safe space. Everything should be really, really sharp now. So I'm just focusing right on the front of that chair at 70mm. And taking that shot, and that's looking pretty good. There's a really nice roll off. You can see beautiful shape in those buttons there, and the top is now no longer overexposed. I have no blinking highlights on my camera. Everything's looking good. Obviously the sides of your shot are looking quite dark, but we're going to fill those in just a second. So every product you shoot is either going to be, if you put this in your head, it's either going to be a cylinder or it's going to be a cube. So if you look at this, it's not a cube, obviously, but what we need to do is work out what sides we actually need to light. We've lit the top, so we know that's fine, but from where the camera's sitting and it's going to be hitting the corner here, you're basically dealing with a cube. Front side, top side, and this side. You can't see the back, you can't see this side, and you obviously can't see underneath. So we've got 3 sides to light. So we've got the top covered. The next thing we need to do is start to fill these sides. So I'm going to pull this light in. I'm going to put this just at the front here, and switch this on here. And what we want to do is we don't necessarily want to just hit it straight on the front. We maybe want to feather it a little bit, and what that's going to do is start to create some shape. If we just like this flat, the product starts to look flat. But if I feather this away a little bit, I can create a little bit of a gradient on that front whilst filling in some of that shadow area as well. So we've just added that one light. Let's take a look what sort of shot we get now. So there we go, you can see it's filled in nicely on this front. It's not flat, you can still see it's a little brighter on the left, and it's just rolling off gently on that gradient and starting to darken towards the corner here. The right hand side is still dark, but we're going to take care of that in a second. If you look at the legs here, you're getting some nice reflection off the varnish on the wood, and it's starting to look quite good. So let's take care of that right hand side. We're going to bring this third light in, also with a softbox on it to just soften it up. If you can't afford these big studio lights and these nice softboxes, don't worry, you can get the same kind of results if you just buy some speed lights. You can get them for 40-50 quid and just put on some shoot-through umbrellas at the front just to soften that light up. But seeing as we have these, we're just going to turn this one on here. I just want to do exactly the same thing. I want to feather it a little bit. I'm just going to start to fill in this edge here. So that's looking fairly good to me. I need to watch them, obviously I'm not casting a shadow because this light stand's getting in the way, but that's looking pretty good. Let's see what we get with that. Okay, so we've added our third light, and let's just take a test shot and see what we get. Okay, so you can see that this third light we've added is way too bright. It's totally blown out the right hand side. It's even helped to start to blow out the top of the product as well. So we need to just turn this light right down, which we'll do now. So I've dropped that on these lights from about 4.8 right down to 3. Let's see what we get now. Just turning that light down. Okay. It's looking much better. It's starting to look maybe a little bit flat though. So maybe on this side it's looking a little bit even all over the product. So I'm going to start to bring it down even a little bit more. I might even take it right down to 2. Just so that we are really killing the light on the right side. We don't want everything to look too flat. We want to still have shape on the whole product as well. So taking that light down. Okay, and I really like the look of that because we've started to fill in those shadows, but not too much, so that we haven't got one side slightly darker than the others, which is giving that nice roll off around the front into a darker portion of the image. And if we look at the legs, we've got 2 beautiful catch lights on that varnish on those turned legs, which is giving the product a nice feel as well. So looking at that, it's looking pretty good, and I think we can start shooting. The first shot we're going to need to take, we have to take with one of these, and this is a photographer's grey card. And you'll see in the edit stage why this is important. This is going to help us make sure that our colour of this product is exactly correct, because sometimes your white balance might be slightly different, sometimes the color of the bulbs may be different, especially if you're using cheaper lights. Having one of these, which is a card just with 3 blocks, one which is 50% grey, and this is grey with no warmth in it, no cool in it, it's right down the middle, no colour mixed into this grey, a pure white and a pure black, and I'll show you in Lightroom what this is going to do. But this is going to be our first shot. We're just going to place our grey card in here, and we're going to take a test shot. One last thing I want to check before I shoot all around this product is I need to make sure that there's none of this ambient light which is in the room affecting the product at all. And the easy way to do that is to just turn my trigger off and take another test shot. So that means no flash is going to fire, and if, as we've got here, the screen is totally black, there's no information, you can't see anything at all, we know that the only thing that's lighting this product are our strobes, which are all the same color. None of this ambient light which you can see and which is lighting me at the moment is affecting our product at all. So we can flip our flashback on now, and we can start shooting. Okay, and I think just looking at it, I think it's probably a little too hot. So what I'm going to do, I've got the balance right, I think, across the product with those lights. I'm going to take it down to F14, which is just going to drop all those lights down just a touch to make sure it's not overexposed. And I quite like the look of that now. It's giving nice shape, and yet we haven't got any parts of that image which feel like they're blowing out to me. We should have plenty of information so that we can start that edit process. Today you've seen me shooting with big studio lights and with these beautiful Octa softboxes, and they are expensive bits of kit, and you might be looking and going, well, how do I perhaps find a cheaper version of this because I can't afford this expensive gear? You can get cheaper versions of all this, but the very cheap fix which I found was to just buy 40, 50 pound speed lights and use a few of those speed lights to build up your light. Now, something you want to take into consideration is you don't want to fire, if this is your product, you don't want to fire that light directly at your product because it's going to give you hot spots and it's going to create very deep shadows. The light's too harsh, so you have to soften it up. So how do you soften that speed light up? Well, what I found is to, instead of fire the light directly at the product, is to turn it away from the product and then pull in something like a large piece of white polystyrene. And by firing that light at that polystyrene, by the time it bounces back, it's going to have softened right up and give something which isn't going to be as directional as this, but is going to be a soft light source instead of that directional hard light source. So if you can imagine your product surrounded on a couple of sides by those white boards with lights firing in and bouncing back to have that soft light, and perhaps even, if you don't have a white ceiling, one hung overhead. So you're firing that light up and it's bouncing back down, and soft light is coming in from all sides. That's the way to do what I've been doing today, but on a budget.